So shalom, hello. My name is Rabbi Johnny Solomon. I am what is known as the virtual rabbi. I'm also the chief learning officer at WebYeshiva.org. And I very much appreciate you joining me for this 4-part course on how to design and deliver a shiur. And as I describe here in the blurb on the right-hand side, and I'm just going to close a window so I can see what you hopefully should be able to see. In this 4-part series, I will share tips about planning, researching, preparing, and delivering a shiur and how to ensure that a shiur leaves an impact on its listeners. And that's the goal, that's the aim. Just before we kick off, just to remind you that there is a plethora of other standalone shiurim or courses related to Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and other themes available at WebYeshiva.org. So I encourage you to register and enjoy the great opportunities available through our service. In addition to that, just a further shout out that I provide a paid service, online spiritual coaching and halachic consultations, which you can book on the WebYeshiva.org website. And if you want to know a little bit about that before booking a session, you can book a free, no obligation discovery call with me, also through our site. With that, let us begin. And I want to tell you what we're going to be doing over the next 4 weeks. So let's move on to the next slide. And we have 4 sessions. The first, taking place today, the 1st of September, is titled, What is a Shiur? And choosing a topic. The second, which will take place on the 8th of September, is researching a topic, recommended resources. The third, on the 15th of September, preparing a source sheet, titles, bios, translation, and vowelization. And the fourth, on the 22nd of September, will address pace, delivery, and impact, as well as possibility for follow-up. What I want to do in each of these sessions is really lead a conversation. This is not a lecture, and this is not a shiur. This is a workshop. It's a workshop where I want to highlight some considerations when planning, designing, putting together and delivering a shiur, which may resonate with you. I very much want you to interrupt me. Okay, this is not meant to be a soliloquy. If you want to interrupt me vocally, with pleasure. If you wish to do so using the chat feature, with pleasure. But there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to offer your thoughts and to ask questions. And I very much hope that we do that. And of course, if you have questions between sessions, you can write to me via my Web Yeshiva email. With that in mind, let us begin by asking the following question. What is a shiur? What I wanted to do is distinguish between 3 things. And I think people often confuse a shiur with other things. So I like food. Everyone likes food. So what I thought I'd do is distinguish between a light snack, street food, and a 2 to 3 course meal. Now, a light snack I would associate with the Yiddish word Wort, which generally means word. But often if somebody's asked to speak for a few minutes at a public event, they're being asked to give a Wort, a cute idea, a nice idea, a meaningful idea. But the point is that they've been given maximum maybe 5 minutes to say one idea. Say the idea, say it nicely, sit down, everyone will be happy, and let's continue with a gefilte fish. That's a Wort. That's not a shiur. Sometimes people are asked to give a mini shiur, which may last maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I compare that to street food. Street food, by the way, can fill you. I had some falafel just last week, just like that picture you can see here. Street food's great. It's not a sit-down formal meal, but it certainly can be temporarily filling. And a mini shiur will generally cover a number of ideas, but holding back perhaps, or curbing them in terms of the depth in which one goes. We're going to use the word shiur for the purpose of this course in relation to what may be described as being a 2 to 3 course meal, maybe even a 4 or 5 course meal if you're really fancy. Remember, I come from a country where people used to have great royal feasts. But here what I mean is a real shiur both lasts a certain amount of time. I've written here 40 to 60 minutes. It could obviously last a little bit more, a little bit less, but that's the kind of thing I'm interested in exploring. How do you plan a 40 to 60 minute shiur, which may be compared to being like a 2 to 3 course meal, something substantive, something with variety, something that takes you through stages from the beginning, from the hors d'oeuvres to a main course, maybe even including a dessert. A real shiur should be satisfying. When you go to a real shiur lasting 40 to 60 minutes, you should be leaving and feeling, wow, I have experienced something wonderful. I've gone through a meaningful amount of ideas. I feel that I filled my spiritual belly with content, with explanations, with inspiration, etc., etc. So it's this third category that I really want us to be focusing on right now, which I hope makes sense to you. Any questions before we move on? Just using these analogies. Any thoughts, questions, feedback? Again, feel free.
Everything is very clear. Thank you.
My pleasure. So here we're focusing on how to basically design and deliver a shiur which may be compared to a 2 to 3 course meal, something meaningfully sophisticated. Not because I'm not interested in light snacks or street food or a vort or a mini shiur, but I think those are a little bit easier to plan, a little bit easier to deliver, but where sometimes people get either work very hard on things and perhaps maybe make mistakes is when dealing with the kind of much more lengthier shiur that we're talking in this third category. Anybody else before we move to the next slide? Okay, so what I want to now do is give examples of what these differences may look like. And I'm actually going to make direct reference to a particular Torah passage. You know that story in Parashat Vayetze where Yaakov Avinu lays down, basically on the Har HaBayit, he lays down and he dreams a dream of the angels going up and down. I presume that's a relatively familiar story, the story of Jacob's dream. But there is one interesting detail. It's a detail which emerges, by the way, from a textual difficulty. In one verse, in Bereshit chapter 28, verse 11, we are told that Yaakov lay his head on the stones, plural. But in a later verse, in chapter 28, verse 18, we're told that Yaakov had his head on a stone, singular. So that grammatical question of how come one verse it talks about stones, plural, and the later verse it talks about stone, singular, leads to an interesting explanation. Just before we go into the next slide, anybody want to remind us of what they think that explanation might be?
They all combined into one.
Beautiful. They all combined into one. And Rashi quotes this idea. And so, if you look on the left-hand side, imagine I was asked to give a Dvar Torah on that week's parasha, and somebody said, give me 3 to 5 minutes, give me a vort, give me a light snack. I'd say, well, there's a verse in chapter 28, verse 11, that mentions stones in plural, and 7 verses later mentions stone in the singular. Rashi tells me that there were many stones, and in fact, they kind of debated about which would merit having Yaakov's head on top of them. They therefore merged and fused into being one singular stone, and this perhaps represents how the Jewish tribes should be able to come together rather than disagree. I presume that at least some of you have heard that idea in one version or another, and I think you'd also agree that one could deliver that idea within 3 to 5 minutes, and it would be very sweet, and it's a very meaningful idea, and it's a vort, it's a light snack. That doesn't mean there isn't more depth to it, but the way in which I've just delivered it is limiting it to a light snack, piece of this piece of Torah. Now, if somebody said, can you give me a mini shiur, 15, 20 minutes, about this dissonance between the stones and the stone and referencing this idea. Well, what I'd actually do is look at the original source which informs Rashi. Now, by the way, we're going to be discussing this in future weeks. There's a mistake many people make when they say Rashi says. 80% of the times that Rashi says something, he's quoting a midrash or a Gemara. Maybe 1 out of 5 remarks, maybe 1 out of 6, are we actually hearing the words of Rashi himself. So, in fact, when one delivers a shiur, really you should say Rashi quoting the midrash or Rashi quoting the Gemara. Now, Rashi here is quoting a midrash, but if you actually look at the original midrash, you find there are 3 different approaches to how many stones were under Yaakov's head. And so if I was giving a mini shiur, I'd actually look at the original midrash. I'd perhaps quote Rashi, but then look at the original source informing Rashi, see these 3 opinions, and then discuss how come Rashi chose one opinion above the other. That would be a very meaningful, intensive 20-minute discussion, which presents 3 different approaches to explaining the difference between stones and stone, and also explaining how Rashi interacts with the original source to which he's quoting, namely the Midrash. That would be a 20-minute shiur. If one was giving a more sophisticated shiur on the same thing, I'd look at that Midrash and the 3 different opinions mentioned there, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemia, and Rabbi Hanan, and then I'd try and explain what led each opinion to say what they say. What are they teaching us in terms of their own particular spiritual worldview? By the way, I'm using this as an example. You could use many different examples. But here you have the same teaching, shall we say, but one is a brief snack of that teaching, namely a short summary of the Rashi. One is a slightly deeper examination of the source of Rashi. One is a deep dive understanding the real debates between the different voices in that original source, which Rashi gives voice to at least one of them, maybe more. Any questions about what I presented here? Obviously, we could apply this to any other piece of Tanakh, to Mishnah, to Gemara, to Halacha, to Machshava, to Tefillah, to Kabbalah, meaning I just use this as a simple case study. But what we need to realize is when you're giving a shiur, people want depth, sophistication, people want something which is substantive, where there is a journey of looking at different ideas, just like the picture here has a table with different dishes, and you taste and enjoy the various different flavors and blends and contrasts. That's what a real meal is. It's not just one singular taste like popcorn on the left, or just a couple of bites of something in your hand. It's what you do when you bring together a range of different flavors which complement one another to become a meal which has a series of courses, which then leads to you feeling satisfied, leads to you feeling, wow, I've had something meaningful here. Any queries, questions about how one could do this or one should do this in terms of other areas of Torah? Any queries? By the way, we're going to get to it, but still, if you're not asking, perhaps you should be asking, how do you know what's the original source of Rashi? Where do we know Rashi gets his ideas from? That's a question we should be asking, because you can't go into the mini shear level, the shear level, unless you're able to examine the original sources which Rashi is referencing. So has anybody ever paid attention that in Chumashim, often in brackets at the end of Rashi, it tells us what sources are informing Rashi. So a regular Chumash Rashi already points us to the right direction. Beyond this, there are a number of books which actually provide all the sources which informed Rashi, which we can have a look at. So I have, just behind me, a sefer called Lipshuto Shel Rashi, a 5-volume set, which brings the Midrashim and Gemarot, which inform Rashi. So if I'm learning Chumash Rashi, and I want to know what are the sources which inform Rashi, I may open that book, and that will help me. There was a query. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's also Targum Yonatan, which gives you also the Gemara where you can find these psukim are discussed. Not in Rashi, but like in the Mikros Dolot, there's a footnote.
Right, in some Mikrot Gdolot, not all,
Yeah.
the newer ones, for example, the Hama'or edition, it lists a range of the rabbinic sources which are the underpinning of Rashi or other things. And this is going to be really relevant as we get to our next slides talking about tools. Because here, this is a great example where most of us have access to and probably are familiar with Chumash with Rashi. But if you teach Chumash with Rashi and you haven't ever looked at the sources which inform Rashi, then you don't really understand Rashi, because you don't understand why Rashi is selecting one reading above the other. And that's definitely an important thing to do. Whether you give a shiur on that or not, that's your choice. But it's definitely an important thing to do if you wish to claim to have understood Rashi. Because Rashi ultimately is collating information from other sources. So to understand Rashi, you need to have seen the dissonance and the contrast between those other sources and what he brings in his commentary on the Chumash, in the Navi, on the Mishnah, on the Gemara. Any further questions on this slide? It's an important one, just to have a sense of the difference between light snack, street food, and the meal, the vort, the mini shiur, and the shiur. Okay. Now, let's therefore focus on that third picture. Anybody who's vegetarian, apologize. This is just a nice picture of a meal with a number of pieces of cutlery, a number of dishes, and that's really what a shiur should be. A shiur should be something where a range of different flavors and tastes, sources and ideas come together to enrich a person's understanding or answer a particular question. And the task of the shiur deliverer is to put together those ideas in a way which is coherent, so that they come in the right order and therefore can be digested in the right way. So I write here at the bottom, like a 2 to 3 course meal, a great shiur requires ingredients, tools, and careful planning about the order and balance of what is to be served. This is, by the way, what it means to design and deliver a shiur. If a person was going to make a beautiful meal, the truth is we do this every week for Shabbat. If you're going to make a beautiful meal with more than one course, what do? You often say, what are we going to have in the first course? What are we going to have in the next? And then you need to get together the ingredients. And you need to prepare the ingredients. And often you need tools. Prepare those ingredients in the right way, each according to different ingredients. And then you need to figure out the balance. Maybe you need to add more salt or more spices or etc. So too with a shiur. You need ingredients, you need tools, you need planning to make sure that the order and balance of what is to be served is going to be satisfying. Now, with this in mind, I want to ask you the following question. Here you can see in my slide, there are a range of tools that you may have in a kitchen. Okay, so you may have various different spoons, you may have different sieves, blenders, choppers, etc. And while a person may not have all of those things, there's a certain number of some of those things which are necessary to make certain dishes. I think that's true. If you didn't have some of those tools, some of those utensils, you would struggle to make certain dishes. And if you did, it would make your life easier, or you would then be able to do so. With that in mind, I want to ask you the following. I can offer my ideas, and we will be doing so in future sessions. But what tools do you need to prepare the shiurim that you wish to deliver. Now, each of us, by the way, may be interested in different topics. Some of us may be interested in tefillah, in Tanakh, in Mishnah, in Midrash, in Halakha. That's fine. But each according to their own menu option, what tools do you need? So if, for example, you're a baker, then the likelihood is you may need things to help you knead and mix things. So if, for example, you're somebody who likes giving shiurim in Tanakh, what tools do you need to have at your disposal, either physically or perhaps digitally? What do you think? If you're speaking, feel free to unmute yourselves.
I like Sefaria and Al HaTorah as very good places for electronic versions of material when I'm doing Chumash kind of shiurim.
Okay, so we're going to get to digital databases soon. But one second. Those are the names of digital databases. What tools do you need from there?
A Mikro Gedolot. So I like the JTS because it has the old JTS, the new JTS, the commentaries translated or relatively translated into English, which for me makes it a lot easier.
Right. So for a Mikro Gedolot, meaning for those who are unfamiliar with the term, a multi-commentary Chumash, which has both the Chumash verses and a range, although obviously never exhaustive, but a range of commentaries, broadly speaking, including those which are more pshat-oriented, like the Ibn Ezra and Rashbam, and perhaps slightly more sophisticated in terms of their analysis, such as Orach Chaim or Kli Yakar, and including Ramban and including Sforno. So something like that would be a good thing if you're preparing a Chumash shiur, because there you get to have a window of what various different commentaries are saying on the verse you're interested in analyzing. So Mikro Gedolot is an essential tool if you're interested in Parshanut. Anybody else? What other tools might you need? Again, whether you have them physically or online.
Also, the other sources like Gemarot and Mishnayot.
Right.
Medrash Rabbah.
Right. If these sources are relevant to your shiur, be it Medrash or Gemara, which, by the way, if you're learning Rashi, they are, because Rashi is ultimately a compendium of ideas based in Midrash and Gemara. So you can't understand Rashi unless you dip into the original sources. You need access to a Midrash. And by the way, Midrash is not a single volume. There's Midrash Rabbah, Medrash Tanchuma, Medrash Halacha, in various different titles for different books of the Torah. So you definitely need those. Anybody else? I mean, these are, again, nowadays we're blessed with digital databases, but you need to have access to them to be able to put together a shiur where you've done your homework. Sorry, please.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. There are other sources like the Sfat Emet and all kinds of Kabbalistic sources.
So if those are relevant, because that's the shiur that you're interested in exploring, obviously you need to determine what is the topic of your shiur that may be relevant, may not be, for that matter. But having access to a range of commentaries is correct. But, I use the word tool quite, insistently. So, for example, a concordance is a tool. A concordance tells us how frequently certain shorashim, certain roots and words appear in the Tanakh. If you're giving a Tanakh shiur, you need to know whether a word has never been used before, is regularly used before, where else it's been used before. That's pretty important. So a standard tool of a Tanakh shiur, apart from obviously having a Tanakh, is, for example, having a concordance, whether that be a physical one or a digital one. There's no question about that. There are obviously commentaries that we've mentioned, which are pretty relevant. Anybody else? And by the way, this need not be limited to Chumash. Yehuda, what do you think?
I think we kind of made a big leap from the first slides to this one. We're already in texts. We haven't defined a scope. We haven't defined an objective. I need to have a clear view of what I want to say before I reach for the first sefer. And
100%. That's what the next slide is going to be on. What I thought I'd do is just dabble with this and then bring us back to that. I 100% agree. Meaning, So far, what I'm asking ourselves is, what do I have in terms of possibilities? Then I'm going to consider what topic I wish to explore. But if, for example, let's take this as an example with these practical kitchen tools in front of me. If I don't have a mixer and I wish to make a meringue, then as much as I wish to make a meringue, the likelihood is I can't make a good one. Okay, again, one could debate the skills and necessary qualifications of making meringue. So you can come up with an idea, but maybe there are certain skills or tools you need in order to do a good job of that. So here I'm actually asking, before we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the specifics of a shiur, which is, what tools do you have at your disposal when you consider what kind of shiur you wish to give? A person wishes to give a shiur about Tanakh who doesn't have access to a Tanakh, unless there's somebody who knows Tanakh Baal Peh, is going to struggle. Somebody who wishes to give a halacha shiur, but has a limited array of access to certain halacha talks, will be only able to give a limited halacha shiur, and that may well be a questionable halacha shiur. So I agree. I'm not yet talking about the specific topics. I'm saying you can do what you can do based on the tools that you have. Fortunately, there are now more digital tools available than ever before, and digital libraries available than ever before. As it happens, by the way, even though I use all of those, I'm a purist, because I think part of the experience of using a particular physical book is quite different to using it in its digital version. But be that as it may, if a person, for example, wishes to discuss a midrash and does not have a midrash and doesn't know where to find it, I don't necessarily think they're qualified to discuss that midrash, because unless they know what the words of the midrash actually say, then they're probably hearing it second hand or third hand and may well be misrepresenting its core meaning. So access to the midrash is pretty important if you want to give a midrash shiur. And the truth is, if you're giving a Chumash Rashi shiur and you don't have access to the Gemara and Medrash, you're likely unable to do that. And similarly with other areas of as I say, Mishnah, Talmud, Halacha, Machshava, etc. So there are certain core basics in the Torah library that one needs access to, just as much as one would need basics in a kitchen to be able to cook things. If you ever watch TV cooking shows, they always have a certain minimum amount of tools in their TV kitchen to help people do whatever they need to do. Well, actually, the same thing works with a shiur. And nobody actually ever necessarily goes through this, but this is important. Okay, any other quick thoughts about tools before we jump into topics? Because that's going to be our major focus for today. So my question was, which tools do you think you need to prepare a shiur? Obviously, depending on the shiur that you're prepared to prepare. You guys are thinking about it. I'll give you, just by the way,
Sorry.
Please.
So if I understand well, then when you want, I want to make a shiur, to prepare a shiur, I have to look first of all of all the tools I have, for instance, available at home.
I think that if you wish to give a shiur, again, nowadays we are blessed to have tools online as well as in our homes. But knowing what tools you have at your disposal, I think, is pretty important. Because I think too often people assume access to certain texts means that we understand those texts. And I disagree. I'm actually not just a stickler, I'm a serious stickler for people investing real time to understand what they're learning before they start teaching. And far too often I've heard people teach things which clearly they don't understand because they didn't go back to the original sources, or they didn't necessarily even look at the original teaching that they're claiming to quote, because they heard it second-hand or third-hand in some kind of summary. And so if you're going to give a shiur, you've got to give me the real things you claim to be giving me. And that means you need to ask yourself what tools and accessibility you have, either in physical sense or in terms of the digital libraries, many of which are free, by the way, and they're wonderful. But that's certainly something to consider. If a person says, I'm going to give a shiur about the laws of Shemitah, and I'm just going to Google things, I would take strong issue that they're going to be able to capably give a compelling and a detailed shiur about the laws of Shemitah, which pays attention to the broad range of opinions. If they're obviously just simply regurgitating the research of other people, that's fine. But that's not necessarily a shiur. That's basically rehashing somebody else's work. And I want people to do things properly.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Any further thoughts?
I'll throw in one other thought, and that is sometimes before being original, one might want to look at what other people write. And so, in fact, there have been quite a number of, or a huge number of organizations and collections of, let's say, Parsha Shiurim, doing great detailed work on all kinds of topics on a Parsha. And you can go back historically 3, 5, 10 years sometimes and look at what other people have written, often very well-learned people in English about that specific topic. So you can sometimes get a starting point and a lead into where you might want to go, as well as spark ideas about things to consider as topics for a shiur.
1,000,000%. I really appreciate you saying that. And I totally agree. And by the way, that's been my journey. My journey of learning and teaching began by reading other people's ideas and thinking about them. However, if we assume that somebody else has put in all the work, that's a nice assumption, but that applies to a handful of people. It doesn't apply to the majority of authors or teachers. And if we're going to give a shiur, we need to have done our own due diligence. Just in life itself, when you're going to sell something, when you're going to deliver something, and you're putting your name to it, you need to have said, I did my due diligence. And one can't simply say, well, this is what the other scholar said, and I'm just relying on him or her. I say, no, come on, if you're going to give a shiur, you need to make sure you go through the thickets of whatever sources or topics or teachings you're claiming to deliver, because it could be that person overlooked an important issue or simply ignored it. So we should never assume that somebody else has looked at every voice and has encountered every opinion. And if we're going to give a shiur, at least we should do a little bit of discovery as well. Now, with that in mind, let's now jump into really our 3 main questions, which we're going to spend the rest of today's session on. If you're going to give a shiur, I said, what is a shiur? And we've defined those 3 different things, one being a vort, one being a small snack, and one being like a meal. And then I say, okay, well, if you're going to give a shiur, what topic are you going to choose? And there are 3 things I wish to address in today's session, which we're going to speak much more globally. And I already told you the other topics we're going to cover in the forthcoming 3 sessions. Number 1, do you know why the topic interests you? And let's hold this thought right now. When a person says, I want to give a shiur on X, Y, or Z, why? Why do you want to give a shiur on that topic? As I write here, to deliver a shiur, you need to be interested in the subject. If you're not interested in the subject, you'll struggle to interest your audience. Still, even if you're interested in the subject, it's important to consider why the topic interests you. This is because knowledge is more meaningful when it is connected to a personal connection or story. So if you're going to give a shiur, you have to either choose a topic or perhaps somebody's asked you to explore a topic. But I'm interested in your relationship with the topic before you start thinking about the listener's relationship with the topic. Because how you relate to it, how you connect to it, will be broadcast by you delivering the shiur. And that will therefore have an effect on the success of that shiur, how well it's received. If you're speaking about something which is very personal to you, then your listeners and the people who are attending your shiur will certainly likely pick up on that. So this is a really important topic. Sometimes people say, just pick a topic that interests you. I say, no, I want you to know why it interests you, why you drawn to this particular topic. You may not necessarily even know, but that's a really important journey you need to go on, because it will help you figure out what's causing you to explore this particular theme or text, and therefore what particular feature of this theme or this text actually really wishes to be your focus of study. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this headline. Do you know why the topic interests you? Perhaps you've previously given a shiur. Do you understand why you were interested in that topic? Oftentimes people talk about ideas because they're reflective of deep interests of that person. Sometimes they consciously understand that, sometimes they don't. But this kind of meditative process as you prepare a shiur, or before you start preparing a shiur, but once you've identified a topic, is really essential. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Yehuda.
Oh, a bit selfish, but the way I got started in my journey as Maggid Shiur is there were certain things that I wanted to learn. I could not find shiurim that met my needs, and I decided to create the shiur that I wanted to hear. And I found that doing it in a collective, I've learned, to paraphrase the Chazal, I learned from my participants and my partners, and this has made my journey successful.
So that's great. That's a really, really meaningful insight, which is you're not just learning. I mean, when people say learn, often the word lishma, often people think for the sake of learning. That's not why we explore a particular topic. Because when I explore a particular topic, I'm not at that moment exploring 10,000 other topics. There has to be generally a reason why you are feeling tugged to explore this versus that. In your case, it was because you felt that that was missing, or that there was a gap of knowledge, or that there was something which you wish to further explore. And it emerged from that hunger of knowledge. And if you're hungry to learn, then when you're teaching those topics, then your learners hear that enthusiasm, that engagement, that connection. Anybody else? This is, by the way, the most important question that people don't ask. They say just pick a topic, or people just choose topics. I want you to know why you're doing so. I need you to know that every shiur that a person truly crafts is somewhat autobiographical in terms of your spiritual search or journey. And you need to understand that, because that will lead you to look in certain directions, because those are the directions which your soul is tugging you to look towards. Preparing a shiur is a spiritual experience. And so understanding your role in that spiritual experience is really important. Any further thoughts? Everyone's gone quiet. I say the word spirituality, everyone's like, what is he talking about? But I'm serious about this. You have to know what's interesting you, because it's a quest. A shiur is a quest for understanding. And you're helping your learners in that journey of understanding. But that journey was stimulated by your quest. And your quest was likely not random. That was likely inspired by or triggered by either an event or something or another you stumbled on. You felt, I really need to know more about that. So it could be that you were somewhere and you saw something, you didn't understand it, and then you wish to explore it more. Maybe you had a disagreement with somebody and you thought X and they thought Y, and you wanted to understand the difference between X and Y. It could be because there's a story that's always interested you, but you don't quite understand why. And there's something embedded in the book of Jonah or a particular Talmudic narrative. It could be X, or it could be Y, or it could be Z. But, by the way, Z is the English version of Z, for those who want to know why. But, just to help translate, know who you are in the process of that quest, in that journey. Know that there's something that you're trying to find for you. And the more you know you, the more likely you'll find it. And the less you understand what's prompting you to explore the particular story, the more likely you'll be looking in the wrong places. You know, there's a great story of the fictional village of Chelm, where somebody loses a precious object. And they're looking on the ground, looking, and a passerby says, what happened? He said, I lost a diamond. He said, okay, I'll come and help. And so both of them on their hands and knees are looking for this diamond. And they said, you lost it here, right? And the guy lost it, said, no, I lost it over there. So he said, so why are we looking here? He said, because there's more light here. It's a powerful story, but too often we prepare shiurim in the areas where there's more light, but not necessarily in the area where we're really wishing to look. And sometimes it's easier to put together these sources or put together this series of ideas, but actually you need to know that the reason you were looking at this story in the first place was for something completely different, because you're wrestling with a question of hashkacha pratis in your life, because you may be going through a personal struggle about faith, or perhaps because there's an erev halacha you're not quite fully making sense of, and that's why you wish to give a shiur on that topic. Don't just then regurgitate what some book says. Think about, why am I interested in this? And then look for that. And yes, it may mean that you look in the darker areas into topics which are less accessible. We need to know that though there are so many resources available online, that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the resources you need to find. I can tell you, when I started writing shiurim, sometimes shiurim that I'd deliver would take weeks to prepare. When I was young and I was in my late teenage years, and the computers we had in England didn't have Hebrew text, I typed all the sources backwards. I've got shiurim of 5-6 pages where every source in Hebrew I typed backwards, because that's how I could make a daf makorot. And by the way, those sources, I went around libraries to find the less easy to find sources that were really interesting me. Now, you may say, who's got time for that? I say, I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. I remember every single source from those shiurim almost 30 years ago. Every single one. And it's not because I'm so brilliant. It's because I put in what we call amelut. Because I was driven by something bigger than just delivering a nice shiur. It was because it was a quest. It was a discovery. It was an adventure. A shiur in preparing is an adventure, but you need to know that you are part of that adventure. Okay, any further reflections on this before we move on to the next point? More than happy to hear further reflections. Okay, the second point, again, one which is often overlooked, is what I've said, are you sure the topic is valid? By the way, here I'm not negating anybody's particular interest. But it's important to know that sometimes we have an idea. And we think that idea makes sense. But maybe the idea doesn't. Maybe the reason why we're the one writing the shiur about a topic that nobody else has ever delivered for is because it's not a thing. The thing that we think is a thing isn't a thing, right? Because we're missing a gap of knowledge. There's a particular detail that we are unaware of, which makes the issue a non-issue. So as I write here, sometimes someone could prepare a shiur that's based on a false premise. For example, assuming that 2 events occurred chronologically in the Torah, when this may not have been the case. Of course, we know the debate between Rashi and the Ramban and others, whether it's Ein Mukdam Muchar b'Torah or Yesh Mukdam Muchar b'Torah. Of course, a person can explore whatever topic they wish. One should endeavor to ensure that the topic you're addressing is valid. For people who are more seasoned, this may well not be the issue. But sometimes a person, enthusiastic, shall we say amateur, may wish to deliver a shiur, and you realize soon enough, perhaps, or a listener will realize soon enough that person just didn't understand what that commentary was doing. And so it's always useful having a sounding board. Somebody say, I'm interested in exploring this. Does this make sense? Does this quest make sense? Even when you yourself are preparing and delivering a shiur on your own, it's always useful sharing a few ideas with somebody and asking their thoughts. Because, Judaism believes in learning b'chavruta, learning in partners. Tovim hashnayim ena echad, says Kohelet. Two are better than one. And especially when you're delivering and exploring a particular topic, perhaps which you're sharing and positing certain original ideas, maybe share it with somebody ahead of time, and you may find that they say, oh, didn't you know that this person talked about this years ago? It wasn't an issue. I'll give you a great example, by the way. I'll give you a great example. This is something which I read, actually I heard in a shiur from a British rabbi called Rabbi Isaac Bernstein, and then I eventually saw the original essay by Rabbi Reuven Margaliot. So we say in the Torah on a number of occasions, the land of Israel is a land flowing with milk and honey. And, you hear that enough times, you think Israel is literally flowing with milk and honey. By the way, if you live in Israel, two things which are quite pricey are milk and honey. So I don't know how much they flow. But either which way, be that as it may. However, Rabbi Reuven Margaliot said something of significance. When you read the story of the 2.5 tribes who wish to live in Eva Yarden, they do so because the pasture is greater there, it's better there. That is to say that you can grow better cows who produce better milk across the Jordan River. So that seems to contradict the idea that Israel is blessed with the bestest milk if 2.5 tribes said, actually living in Eva Yarden across the Jordan is better for us. Secondly, many times when we talk about honey, we don't assume we're talking about bee honey. Instead, we're talking about date honey. So Rabbi Reuven Margaliot, he posits an idea. By the way, you can accept this or not. I'm not here to shove it down your throat. But when we say chalav in the Bible, sometimes it means milk, but often it means white wine. And he claims that this particular source actually refers to the white wine from the vineyards of Israel, and that the honey is date honey. So imagine you were giving a shiur about Eretz about chalav udvash, and it was based on the premise that it's all about real milk and real honey. You may be wrong. You may have misunderstood the whole concept. That doesn't make you bad. It just means that there's a particular reading which actually is quite compelling that you may not have yet stumbled by. Always good to share something with people ahead of time. And let's say if somebody would say, I'm giving a shiur about this topic, I'd say, oh, by the way, did you know about that? And they'd say, I didn't. And then that would perhaps help them prepare their shiur, at least paying attention to or incorporating a range of interpretations about what these words may well mean. And this applies, by the way, not just to these terms and these words, but to many terms and many words. And especially if you're relying on just one translation when you prepare a shiur, if you're relying on an English translation, that's always a very sketchy thing to do because translators are themselves interpreters. So if you are interested in translations, look at a variety of translations, and that may well lead you to reconsider how you're presenting, how you're explaining a particular idea, be it, translating yir'ah as awe rather than fear. That's an important thing to do, as well as many other things. Dveikut, cleaving to God or holding on to God, being another example where the different translations will lead to meaningfully different outcomes in terms of the shiur that you're delivering. Any questions about this, about the validity of a topic, or at least the validity of the premise which is generating or which is the foundation of your topic?
Just to add to your last point about translations, especially important as every translation, of course, is an interpretation, but also it's very good to get a number of dictionaries and try translating it yourself as well.
100%. Yeah. I mean, translations are themselves often confusing and sometimes do completely ill to the development of a shiur. Sometimes when you add a translation to a text, at the heading of your shiur, you may not pay attention, and we're going to mention this in future sessions. Your translation may completely contradict the interpretations which are going to be later provided. You really need to read these sources carefully, and I agree. Writing your own translation, if researched with care, is valid and sometimes absolutely necessary. Yeah, so just if you're going to give a shiur, make sure that you're explaining the words the way you believe they need to be explained. And that's not always the case. Any further thoughts about this? Okay, let's get to our third topic for today. And you can see we're just speaking a little bit more globally. In general, most shiurim are trying to explore a question and provide an answer or a range of answers, or they're involved in analysis or trying to provide some insight. Which is, obviously, you can probably think of other examples where this is not the case, but most shiurim are trying to explore a question or give an answer to a question or analyze or give some kind of refreshing approach to a teaching, a text, a story, a prayer that either may or may not be familiar. It's important to know what you're doing in a shiur. You may think you're doing a question and answer, but in fact you're giving analysis. You may be doing both, by the way. One is not necessarily mutually exclusive of one another. One word I try and avoid is answer, especially when it's prefaced with the word the. At best, when I teach Torah, I provide an answer or I share an answer. There are very, very few things emerging in Torah where there is the answer. Too often I hear Divrei Torah and Shiurim, says, a question is asked, da-da-da-da-da, and the answer is da-da-da-da-da. And I'm thinking, it's not the answer. I can tell you 7 other answers. And it does offense to those 7 other opinions, who either you are ignorant of, or you think you know better. The language is important. But again, in terms of the experience of preparing your shiur and the experience of receiving your shiur as a listener, participant, it's important for me to know what's happening in the shiur. Is there a question? Is there an analysis? What kind of, are you trying to provide me an insight? Be clear in the signposting of your shiur so the participants know what journey you're taking them on. Because there's nothing more annoying than attending a shiur and thinking it's one thing, but in the end it becomes another thing. Thinking it's a question and answer becomes then some kind of vague analysis. Because, people make choices to attend shiurim. They give up time, like you're doing right now. And so things need to be representative of what you claim the shiur to be addressing, representative of what you claim to be providing in that time period that you're delivering your shiur and they're attending and engaging in that learning journey. So any thoughts about this in terms of framing the shiur, understanding what you're doing, understanding what you're providing? So what I want us to do is kind of, and by the way, thank you to Nathan for those sources. And I can see some of the other chats as well from Tzvi. I appreciate it. And Yehuda from the beginning. I appreciate that too. But what I want to do now is just kind of almost go backwards and just do a review right now. And just as a quick aside, and I'll be repeating this in the next 3 sessions. Every shiur should conclude with a review and with an application. But most certainly a review. Pedagogically, it's a good idea. And also, by the point that you finish the shiur, people may well have forgotten where you began. So just in terms of helping them make sense of what journey they've been on, do a good review. Here we're going to do a reverse review. So here we just spoke about what are you doing in a shiur? Are you doing a question and answer? Are you providing analysis or an insight? You need to be clear to your participants what the shiur is. Now, of course, when a shiur is a meal, like I said, a 2 to 3 course meal, you may be doing both. You may begin with a question, then lead to an analysis, that leads to an answer. That's fantastic. But make sure that people know what you're doing with them. We also mentioned that the topic needs to be valid. Yeah, it may be there's something you're curious about, but it's based on an incorrect calculation or reference or whatever. Always have somebody that you can throw ideas around and say, when people say, do you think this is a good idea or not? By the way, I do this with a lot of educators, a lot of rabbis who share me their ideas, and I say that makes sense. It's not. It's always good to have a go-to person behind the scenes. I mentioned beforehand, do you know why you're interested in that topic? When you're going to deliver a shiur, choose a topic, but you also need to understand why I'm choosing that topic. What's my role in the story? What's my connection? And that will help you be selective in terms of the sources you explore and the insights that you wish to analyze. If, for example, you're more inclined with mysticism and you're studying a particular text, then you're more likely to look at mystical teachings. So knowing why you're looking at this particular thing is particularly useful. We mentioned tools, and like cookery, where you need certain tools to do certain types of cookery, you need certain tools to deliver certain shiurim. Tools meaning access to text, that's true, but also access to certain tool/texts. We mentioned dictionaries. So without dictionaries, you'll struggle to necessarily know the meaning of certain words. A famous Talmudic dictionary, the Jastrow dictionary. I mentioned a concordance. These are tools which are really quite important. And there are many others aside as well. We talked about the very idea of a meal being 2 to 3 courses. That means there needs to be a flow of ideas, perhaps a diversity of ideas, but each flowing together, being balanced to make sure it's satisfying. And just like a meal where you want the people who participated to feel satisfied at the end, you need to ask yourself, if I've gone through all this material, will those who have participated feel satisfied? Many, many times I've gone to a shiur and I felt very dissatisfied. I felt that the promise of exploring X was not provided by the teacher. And that can be a very frustrating outcome. So you want to give people a meal that satisfies them. Ask yourself, by the end, will they have covered this? And that's why a review is good, because you can then say to yourself and to them, we've covered those particular topics. Here we spoke about the different types of, shall we say, shiurim, one being a vort, one being a mini shiur, one being a shiur. If somebody asks you to talk, they may actually only want you to give a vort. They may want you to give a mini shiur. They may want to give you shiur. Be clear what the scope is. What is the task? What are you being asked to do? And going back to our original slide, so this is what we're planning to cover over the next 3 sessions. Researching a topic, recommended resources, that's next week. Section 3 is preparing a source sheet, titles, bios, translation, and vowelization. That's going to be very important because actually people need vowelized text, but sometimes AI, which some people are using now to vowelize text, can cause more problems than you may imagine. Pace, delivery, and impact and possibility for follow-up. So those are the main sources. Next week, we're going to be basically saying, how do we research a topic? And I'm going to be offering some real pro tips. I'm going to show you books, both from my personal library and online. If you're researching a piece of Haggadah, which are the best go-to places to help you? What are the best kind of resources online to particularly research a specific topic? Obviously, if you have specific questions that you'd like to ask, either feel free to ask them now or feel free to be in contact with me between now and then. Again, I can see the comments, which I very much appreciate. Any final questions before we wrap up? Everyone's being so quiet.
Maybe just to say, also
Sorry?
beware of. I say also beware of structural issues like false dichotomies or straw dichotomies that can lead to real problems with people being dissatisfied with the shiur. and references in a Shiur to global references that aren't factual, like referring to things like Chazal says or the rabbis say. When have they ever agreed about anything? And I guess blanket sort of structural issues like that.
Right, 100%. I mean, I mentioned the issue with Rashi earlier on, and I plan to mention that specifically in our third shiur. I have already a list of topics, and that idea that, again, when we say Chazal say, that's reasonable if there is something for which there's absolute consensus, and there's just a generic person. By the way, if a person of Chazal says, then tell me the person. That's not just because it brings redemption to the word to quote that. It's because that reflects the worldview of that particular scholar. It matters who says which particular things. You know, one singular individual does not represent the totality of the rabbinic sages over centuries. And that's absurd to claim that way. And it's sloppy if we simply just say Chazal say. And it's disrespectful to the particular author. So I agree. And I agree in terms of those, straw man arguments, which is what I was talking about in terms of validity. It's essential that we are actually clear that what we are trying to address is a substantive issue, or is at least a legitimate issue worthy of examination and worthy of exploration. So I thank you very, very much for those insights. I look forward to next week. As mentioned, please feel free to be in contact. Obviously, check out the WebYeshiva.org website for other shiurim, for Elul, and for the rest of the year. Also, our Halacha Mastery program. And of course, if you're interested in my virtual rabbi services, please do be in contact. And I wish you, it's been a difficult day, but I wish you a good week, and may we have Besort Tovot, better news.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.
So,
Bye-bye.